Hello children. Now we stopped last time till the female reproductive system. Now let's begin with the next female reproductive system, and even we covered with gametogenesis, oogenesis, and now we have to cover the cycle, that is a menstrual cycle. Okay, now when I say a menstrual cycle, it is a reproductive cycle in female primates. For example, in apes, or in you can say monkeys, in human beings, right? And this particular when I say menstrual cycle, means what? It is a cycle that keeps on repeating after every 28 days interval. Okay, meaning one menstruation is done, then other starts. That is a cycle completely, which happens in regular interval of 28 days cycle, right? Now when we use the terms like menarche and menopause. Menarche is the starting, the onset of the menstruation. When does the menarche happens? When a female attains a puberty. That time the menarche starts. That is the onset of the menstruation start, right? And when I say menopause, now menopause is a ceases. It ceases of the menstrual cycle, meaning at the age of about 50 years in females, the menstrual cycle stops, and this is known as a menopause. Okay, the cyclic menstruation is an indication of the normal reproductive phase. Now these every, you can say, in say the period of time, that is 5 days or 7 days period of time of menstrual cycle, one egg is released in every month. In middle of the cycle, you can say one egg or one ovum is always released during the menstrual cycle. Okay, that is every month period I am talking about. Now this menstrual cycle has different phases. Now let's go into the detail about the phases. The names of the phases are: first is menstrual phase, second is follicular phase, third is ovulatory phase, and the fourth one is luteal phase. So let's go into the detail of all the four. The first one, that is menstrual phase. The cycle starts with menstrual phase. It lasts for about 3 to 5 days and involves the following events. Okay, now the cycle starts with the menstrual phase. You can also name this phase as a bleeding phase. Okay, how much does it last for? For about 3 to 5 days as a normal period of time that I can say for the menstrual phase. Now here, what are the following events that takes place during the menstrual phase? If fertilization does not occur, the unfertilized egg undergoes autolysis, breaking down. Okay. Now, reduction of the luteinizing hormone level causes regression of corpus luteum by autolysis, and thus a consequent fall in the progesterone level in the blood happens. Right? Now, if you remember the three lining when we spoke about in the diagram of female reproductive system, yes, out of the three lining, the endometrial lining which is there of the uterus, it breaks down due to the deficiency of progesterone. Yes, and what happens? The blood vessels rupture, causing bleeding through the vagina, and that causes bleeding, right? The process is called menstruation or menstrual flow. Now it occurs only when the ovum is not fertilized. That is but obvious. Now when I talk about the second phase, that is the follicular phase. You can also name it as proliferative phase. Okay, proliferative phase. Now how much does it last for? It lasts for 14 days. And involves the following events, like what? The primary follicles, if you remember, yes, the primary follicles in the ovary grow to become a mature Graafian follicle. Okay, what happens? The primary follicle in the ovary, it matures into a Graafian follicle. Now simultaneously, the endometrium which was breaking down, which broke down in the uterus because of the deficiency of progesterone, what happens to the endometrium? It starts regenerating through proliferation, right? Now the changes in the ovary and the uterus are induced by changes in the levels of pituitary and ovarian hormones, that is FSH and estrogen. FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone. Now what happens to the secretion of the gonadotrophins, that is LH and FSH? It increases gradually, right? Now during the follicular phase and stimulates what? The follicular development as well as secretion of estrogen by the growing follicles. This is about the follicular phase, which takes place for 14 days, right? Which lasts for 14 days, right? Now the third phase, which is ovulatory phase. Now both the LH and the FSH attain a peak level in the middle of the cycle, about 14th day, you can say, the last 14th day of the follicular phase. Now here what happens is a rapid secretion of luteinizing hormone leading to its maximum level during the mid-cycle is called the LH surge. I repeat, the rapid secretion of the luteinizing hormone leading to its maximum level during the mid-cycle is called a LH surge, that is luteinizing surge, hormone surge, right? Now, it induces rupture of Graafian follicle and thereby the release of ovum, that is ovulation. Now the ovulation, which is the ovulatory phase that you can say, is followed by luteal phase. Now luteal phase is what? This phase lasts for about 10 days and involves some events like what? The remaining parts of the Graafian follicle transform into a corpus luteum, right? The corpus luteum secretes the large amount of progesterone essential to maintain the endometrium. Maintain the endometrium meaning we have to maintain the lining of the endometrium, so that in the next phase after the 28-day cycle, what happens? Endometrium again starts breaking down because of deficiency in what? Deficiency in the progesterone level, right? So the endometrium is necessary for what? The implantation of the fertilized ovum and other events of pregnancy as well, right? During pregnancy, all events of the menstrual cycle stops and there is no menstruation. Yes, and why? Because from this menstrual blood, a baby has been formed. In the absence of fertilization, the corpus luteum degenerates. Right? What is the corpus luteum? It is the remaining part of the Graafian follicle which is there that gets transformed into a corpus luteum. Right? So what happens in the absence of the fertilization? The corpus luteum degenerates. This causes disintegration of endometrium, leading to the menstruation. Now only the basal part of the endometrium persists, which forms a source of new lining and a new cycle starts. Okay. Now we have to note that the menstrual cycle which is there is absent temporarily during pregnancy and lactation periods and permanently after menopause. However, it can be absent due to stress, due to poor health, etc. Menstruation is also called weeping of uterus for the lost ovum or funeral of unfertilized egg. Okay. So you can also name it as that. It is just a note that we have to take into consideration. So this was all about the menstrual cycle. The next topic that we have to learn is about the fertilization. Now when I say about fertilization, now we need to know what is insemination as well before that. Now what do you mean by insemination? Now the discharge of the semen, okay, the discharge of the semen by the penis to the female vagina during coitus. This is known as what? Insemination. Okay. The motile sperm moves to the cervix, enter the uterus and reaches to the ampullary isthmus junction of the fallopian tube. Ampullary isthmic junction, when I say, it is the ampulla and the isthmus. The ovum released from the ovary reaches to the ampullary isthmic junction where fertilization takes place, and that is why the ovum as well as the sperm, the transport, meaning the transport of the ovum as well as the sperm should be simultaneous, and then only the fertilization can take place. And this explanation says what? All copulation do not lead to fertilization or pregnancy. Okay, so the fusion of the male and the female gamete, okay, is known as what? The fertilization. Now when I say the fusion of the male and the female gamete, it is the process of the fusion of the male gamete, that is sperm, and the female gamete, that is ovum, that is known as fertilization, right? Now a sperm during fertilization comes in contact with the zona pellucida of the ovum, okay, and induces changes in the membrane which blocks the entry of the other sperms, right? Which blocks the entry of the other sperms. Now what happens? Thus ensuring that only one sperm can fertilize an ovum. That is, it prevents what? Polyspermy, meaning it prevents from entering many sperm into the ovum, right? Now the secretion of the acrosome help the sperm to enter into the cytoplasm of ovum through zona pellucida and the plasma membrane. Now we already know that sperm is completely covered by a membrane, that is plasma membrane, the outer covering, right? Now corona radiata, which is there, it is the innermost layer of the ovum. What is it? Corona radiata is the innermost layer of the ovum. It is dissolved by corona penetrating enzymes. Okay, it is dissolved by corona penetrating enzymes of acrosome. Now this induces the completion of meiotic division. of the secondary oocyte. Now, secondary meiotic division results in the formation of the secondary polar body and a haploid ovum. Now, the haploid nucleus of the sperm and that of the ovum fuse together to form a diploid zygote. Now, the sex of the baby is decided at this stage. After fusion of the male and the female gametes, the zygote would carry either an XX or XY, depending on whether the sperm carrying is X or Y fertilize the ovum, right? The zygote carrying XX would develop into a female baby and XY would develop into a male baby. The next topic that we have to deal with is the development of an embryo or the embryonic development that you can see. The development of an embryo from fertilized ovum involves the following events. Now, the mitotic division starts as the zygote or the fertilized ovum that you can say moves through the isthmus of the oviduct or the fallopian tube towards the uterus, forming what? 2, 4, 8, 16 daughter cells called the blastomeres. Now, this process is called cleavage. Now, during cleavage, the young embryo is slowly moving down the fallopian tube towards the uterus and events takes place. Like what? First is the embryo with 8 to 16 blastomeres is called a morula. What is it known as? Morula. Now, but it is not larger than a zygote. Let me clarify that. Morula is not larger than a zygote. The morula continues to divide and transform into blastocyst as it moves further into the uterus. Now, this process of transformation is called blastulation. Yes, the process of transformation of what? From morula to the blastocyst, that is blastulation. Now, the blastomere in the blastocyst, okay, the blastomere in the blastocyst are arranged into an outer layer which is called tropoblast. What is it known as? Tropoblast. And the inner layer or the inner cells that you can say, a group of cells which is attached to the tropoblast is known as the inner cell mass. Okay, now the outer layer, that is the tropoblast. Outer layer means what? The blastomeres and the blastocysts which are arranged in the outer layer, that is tropoblast. The tropoblast layer then gets attached to the endometrium and the inner cell mass differentiates into an embryo. After attachment, the uterine cells divide rapidly and cover the blastocyst. As a result, the blastocyst becomes what? Embedded into an endometrium of the uterus. This is called implantation, right? Now, which leads to what? Pregnancy. That is, this is a time where you can say from conception to the birth that you can say. Okay. Now, what happens during pregnancy, or what are the changes that takes place during pregnancy? Now, after implantation, a finger-like projections appear on the tropoblast, which is known as chorionic villi, which are surrounded by the uterine tissue and maternal blood. The chorionic villi and the uterine tissue become interdigitated with each other and jointly form a structural and functional unit between the fetus and maternal body called placenta. Okay, now what does a placenta do? The placenta performs many functions, like what? It facilitates the supply of oxygen and nutrients to the embryo. It aids in the removal of carbon dioxide and waste materials produced by the fetus. And you can also say it is connected to the embryo. The placenta is connected to the embryo through what? The umbilical cord, right? The umbilical cord, which helps in the transport of substances to and from the embryo. Now, placenta also acts as an endocrine tissue and produces several hormones like what? The HCG, that is human chorionic gonadotropin, or human placental lactogen, estrogen, progesterone, etc. In the later phase of pregnancy, the hormone called relaxin is also secreted by the ovary. It is important to note that the human chorionic gonadotropin and the human placental lactogen, right, and relaxin are produced in women only during pregnancy. In addition, the levels of other hormones like estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, prolactin, etc. are increased several times in the maternal blood during pregnancy. Now, the increased production of these hormones is necessary to support fetal growth, metabolic changes in the mother, and maintenance of pregnancy. Okay. Now, this was about the functions of the placenta and about the changes that takes place during pregnancy. Now, there is a formation of germ layers. How does that take place? Now, immediately after implantation, the inner cell mass differentiate into an outer layer, which is known as ectoderm, and an inner layer, which is known as an endoderm. and the mesoderm, that is the middle layer that you can see, soon develops between the ectoderm and the endoderm, thus transforming the blastocyst into a 3-layer structure called gastrula by a process called gastrulation. So formation of the germ cells, you can say it as what? Gastrulation. These 3 layers gives rise to all tissues and organs in an adult. Inner cell mass contains certain cells called stem cells, which have the potency to give rise to all the tissues and organs. Okay. Now this was about the gastrulation, you can say, that is the formation of a germ cell. Next comes the changes in the embryo. The next we have to learn is about what changes occurred in the embryo. Now during pregnancy, what happens? During pregnancy, we all know the period of the pregnancy is what? That is 9 months. Now after 1 month is completed of the pregnancy, the fetus develops its heart, right? Meaning the heart is formed in the fetus. So the first sign of growing fetus is the sound of the heart, which is carefully heard by the stethoscope. By the end of the 2nd month, the fetus develops limbs and digits. By the end of 12 weeks, major organ systems and the external genitalia are well developed. The first movement of the fetus and the appearance of hair can be observed during the 5th month of the pregnancy. By the end of 24 weeks, that is the 2nd trimester. Now when I say trimester, the 9 months of period is divided into 3 trimesters. The first trimester, the second and the third. Now when I say the first trimester is the first 3 months of pregnancy. The second is the next 3 months and the third is the last 3 months of pregnancy, right? So these are divided into 3 trimesters. Okay. Now in the 2nd trimester, that is by the end of the 24 weeks, you can say, the body is covered with fine hair, eyelids get separated and eyelashes are formed. Now by the end of 9 months of pregnancy, what happens? The fetus is developed fully and is ready for delivery, right? Now when I say ready for delivery, which means the process which is known as parturition, right? Parturition is the delivery of the baby, like delivering a baby. The time period during which the embryo remains in the uterus, that is after the last day of menstruation to the day in parturition, is called gestation. I repeat, the period when the embryo remains in the uterus, that is after the last day of menstruation to the day in parturition, is called gestation. Now the gestation period of human is about 9 months. Right? Vigorous contraction of the uterus at the end of pregnancy causes what? Delivery of the fetus. This process of delivery of the fetus or the childbirth is called parturition. It is induced by a complex neuroendocrine mechanism. Now the signals of parturition originate from the fully developed fetus and the placenta, which induce mild uterine contractions called fetal ejection reflex. Now this triggers the release of oxytocin hormone from the maternal pituitary. It promotes contraction and uterine muscles, which in turn stimulate further secretion of oxytocin. Now the stimulatory reflex between the uterine contraction and the oxytocin secretion continues, resulting in stronger contraction. Now what will this lead to? Expulsion of the baby out of the uterus through the birth canal. Right? Now soon after the birth of the baby, placenta is also expelled out of the uterus. Now relaxin hormone, I hope you remember about the relaxing hormone that we spoke in the changes during pregnancy, that is in function of placenta, right? The relaxing hormone, which in the later phase of pregnancy, the hormone relaxin is secreted by ovary, right? So this relaxing hormone, what is it said as? It relaxes the pelvic ligaments of mother to prepare for the childbirth, right? Now the next topic that we have to go with is the lactation. The mammary glands in female undergo differentiation during pregnancy. The production and release of milk by the mammary glands of female after birth of a young one is called lactation. The first milk which comes out from the mother after the birth of the child, that is known as the colostrum. Now when I say colostrum, it is rich in antibodies. Now when I say antibodies, the one which fight against the infection, we already know about it. That is which fight against the antigens. Now colostrum is kind of a yellow color milk that you can see. Now, if the baby, it is said that the baby should have colostrum, that is the first 3 months of the pregnancy, of the lactating period, the baby should have the mother's milk. Why? Because it is very essential, because in this milk there is a lot of antibodies which are there, which will build the baby's immune system or immunity, because the baby is not immune, is not good immune right now. So that is the reason, to make it more good immunity, we have to provide the baby the colostrum milk only, which a mother can only provide. Now, the first milk which comes out of the mother's mammary gland just after the childbirth is called a colostrum, right? Now, it is rich in proteins and energy, along with the antibodies that provide passive immunity to the newborn. Breastfeeding during the initial period of infant growth is highly recommended by the doctors by bringing up a healthy baby. So this was all about the chapter human reproduction. We learned different processes which was involved in human reproduction. Study thoroughly. Happy studying. Thank you so much.